Hello everyone. So in this quick video, I will talk a little bit about two slides that you need to have in your PowerPoint about an article. Let me quickly share the PowerPoint. And both actually have to do with critical thinking. You really have to think deeply about what the author is doing in his or her article. First of all, the slide about the argument or the statement of an author has to do with the new findings that the author presents, okay? It doesn't necessarily have to be an argument. It can be just a simple statement. What's more important is always think when you read an article, what is new? What is the current established knowledge about this theme? And what is new? What does the author add to the current scholarship about a topic? Where can I find this? Where can I find this kind of statement? Well, look into the introduction and look into the conclusion. This is where you will usually find what the author thinks he or she is contributing to the field, okay? So just to give you an example, this is an article, excerpt from Charlotte Horlick's article about gold-painted Celadon. And you can see up here, she says, little research, this is from the introduction, okay? So little research has been carried out, rooted in the prevailing belief that cylinder production went into decline in the 13th, 14th centuries, blah, blah. However, suggesting that potters continued to manufacture highly advanced and necessarily pleasing vessels throughout the latter half of the colonial rule. So what does she do here? She's saying in the red, you see these red boxes. So the red boxes are basically saying, this is what has been done. And then the green box, this is basically saying, this is what I'm doing in this article, okay? So first she says, little research has been carried out about these gold-painted Celadons because so far scholars have been only thinking about 12th century Celadon. They totally neglected anything after the 12th century because they thought it was just declining and it was not high quality, right? So she's saying, no, they were highly advanced. They were aesthetically pleasing vessels. They just have been overlooked so far. And I'm going to talk about them and I'm going to show you how beautiful these pieces are, okay? So what is a contribution? She is contributing to the field of Goryeo-Celadon research, a little piece about late Goryeo period, 13th and 14th century gold-painted Celadon. And this is new, this is a new finding because so far people have mostly been focusing on the 12th century, on earlier Celadon. Okay, you get where I'm going here with the new findings and what's new about the article, what's the statement, right? So this is what I want you to find and what I want you to put on the slide that talks about the argument or statement of the author. Now, an author needs evidence to support these new findings, okay? Depending on the field, those pieces of evidence can be very different. Art historians would always, or most of the time, look at material objects, right? Visual objects. Historians might look at historical documents, right? A literature scholar might look at a poem or a prose text, right? And so there are different types of sources, different types of research methods that can be used to support a new finding. And there are two types of source material, primary and secondary. Let me talk about the primary source material first. So primary source material is basically first-hand accounts. So historical documents, literary works, art objects, right? So let me give you an example for research methods of such primary source material. So here we have an excerpt from Patricia Frick's article about lacquerware, Korean lacquerware. Okay, so let's just quickly look at the start of this section here. She writes, the sloping sections at the edge of the cover display a row of star motifs on the shell, ornamentation of both the cover and the box are decorated on the sides. So you can already see that she seems to be describing something, right? So she is describing what you see on the lower right, which is a little lacquer box from the Goryeo period. So what she's doing here is an art historian she's doing a visual analysis of an object, right? And that object, that lacquer box, is her primary source material, right? So she's using this primary source material for a visual analysis, and that is her research method, visual analysis, okay? Professor Haga, who is a historian, and in this article, of which I show you an excerpt, talks about tea and wabi, right? The aesthetics of wabi. He's also using primary source material. And in his case, he's using a poem that was written by Senrikyu, the 16th century tea practitioner. And on the left-hand side, he has the Japanese pronunciation, hana onomi, etc. And then on the right-hand side is his English translation. So he's using primary source material, in this case, a poem from the 16th century, for a literary analysis or literature analysis to discuss the term wabi. What did wabi mean to a person in the 16th century? Let me look at this poem to find out more about it. Okay, so that is his research approach, his research method, literary or literature analysis. Another one, Victor Meyer, in his book about tea, The History of Tea. Victor Meyer is a historian, right? So as a historian, he used primary source material such as this 5th century work, Shishuo Xinyu, right? New Account of Tales of the World. And he's using this primary source material for a historical analysis. What happened back then in the 5th and 6th century? How did people consume tea? When did they consume tea, etc., etc. So he has these research questions in his mind, and he's using these primary source records or material to find out more about it. So in contrast to Haga, who was using literature, and in contrast to Patricia Frick, who was using like material objects, Professor Victor Meyer is using texts, historical texts, to find out more about what happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Now, the second type of source material is secondary source material. This is basically an indirect account. This is something that has been already analyzed and interpreted by other people. So when we look at scholarly books or articles, we usually refer to them as secondary source material. They're not primary source material, okay? So for instance, we have this, these 7, 8, 9, these 3 footnotes here in an article by Masanari Nishimura about ceramics. And he references a couple of scholars, all contemporary, right? How many scholars do we see here? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So he is referencing 4 secondary sources. He is referencing 4 authors who wrote articles about, you know, green glaze ceramics, Goryeo Celadons, etc., etc. So whenever authors cite from other authors, check their footnotes, they're basically referencing secondary source material, okay? And in this case, this is actually quite interesting. He's referencing himself, right? He's referencing other secondary material that was produced by him, right? The last one. Okay. And that's it. Thank you for listening.